The conference room on the top floor of Harrison Development featured huge windows offering a sweeping view of the city skyline. Beyond the shimmering glass in the morning sun, old and new skyscrapers competed in silhouette. Standing against this backdrop, Alex Harrison was clad in the latest suit from a prestigious Italian brand. His posture was straight, exuding an air of authority unexpected from someone only 30 years old. On the large screen in the conference room, a presentation on a major resort development, created with the latest CGI, was being displayed. Let me explain about the Bayside Resort Development Project. Alex's voice was filled with confidence. The screen showed successive images of a luxurious resort hotel, shopping mall, and marina complex. Most of this area is occupied by unproductive old farmland and unused buildings. We need to completely revitalize this area and transform it into a state-of-the-art resort facility suitable for the 21st century. During the presentation, nods from the executives in the room were visible. Alex continued, feeling the response. All existing buildings will be demolished, and the farmland cleared. Wait. A quiet yet authoritative voice filled the room. It was Michael Harrison, the current chairman and Alex's father, his face marked by a deep concern. This land has a history that has been passed down through generations. It has stories of the people who live on it. We should seek a way to coexist with it. Alex showed a clear expression of irritation. Father, such thinking is outdated. Modern business should prioritize efficiency and profit. We cannot grow if we are bound by sentimental values. To speak to your father, the chairman, with such arrogance. One of the executive members stood up, his voice clearly angry. Just because you are a candidate to succeed doesn't mean we can overlook such behavior. The tension in the room grew tighter. Other executives also looked at Alex with disapproving eyes. However, Alex's expression turned even more defiant. I am the one who will take over the company, he raised his voice. The projector's light cast a pale light on his profile. Old ideas must be discarded. This development will succeed. It is the future of this company, and my future. Michael slowly closed his eyes. His face showed more deep disappointment and concern than anger. 30 years ago, he too had spoken about a new era of development in this very same conference room, but it was never about denying the value of the land. My son, Michael said quietly yet firmly. It is important to pursue profit. But without understanding the significance of the land, there is no real development. Significance, you say? Alex smirked sarcastically. Numbers tell everything. If this development is realized, the value of our company will double. What else do we need? The executives gasped. Michael's face clouded over. Outside the window, shadows of the new buildings stretched long over the old cityscape, symbolizing the clash of generational values unfolding in the conference room. With a triumphant look, Alex was about to continue the presentation. In his eyes, only the glamorous vision of the post-development future existed, the history that once was there, the lives of the people, and his father's teachings. Then, something unexpected happened. As the meeting ended, the door opened, and the executives left one by one in silence. Alex, left alone, quickly began gathering his presentation materials. His irritation at his proposal being overturned by his father was evident in every movement. Alex. His father's voice came from behind. Turning around, Michael stood there looking exhausted, a stark contrast to his usual dignified appearance, appearing somewhat fragile. I have nothing more to discuss with you. Alex said coldly. It was then. Suddenly, Michael clutched his chest and staggered forward. His expensive leather shoes squeaked against the floor, and the reflection of his faltering figure appeared in the window glass. Father. Although he raised his voice reflexively, Alex's body stiffened for a moment, unable to believe what was happening in front of him. Somebody, he shouted down the hallway. Call the secretary. And an ambulance. A flustered secretary arrived quickly and began arranging for an ambulance. Alex knelt beside his fallen father, unconsciously concerned about his expensive suit touching the floor. The will. Michael gasped between strained breaths. There's something I need to tell you. We can talk about that later. Alex cut off his father's words. Just rest for now. Despite the urgency in his voice, it was clear he was thinking about how this situation would affect the upcoming development plans. The few minutes it took for the ambulance to arrive were eerily silent in the conference room. On the top floor of the high-rise building, father and son faced each other, as if the distance between their values was as vast as the physical space separating them. The ambulance arrived, and Michael was quickly moved to a stretcher. The paramedics mentioned a high likelihood of a severe heart attack. Alex heard these words while checking his smartphone for the schedule of his next meeting. Upon arrival at the hospital, doctors rushed Michael to the emergency room. At that moment, Alex's smartphone rang. Mr. Harrison. A voice came from behind. As Alex turned to answer his phone, a middle-aged doctor in a white coat stood there. I need to discuss your father's condition with you. Reluctantly putting away his phone, Alex faced the doctor. Your father has had a severe heart attack. His condition is stable for now, but he needs careful monitoring. He will require complete rest for some time. How long? Alex's voice mixed with impatience. We have an important board meeting next week. The doctor frowned. He will need at least a few weeks. Furthermore. A few weeks? Alex raised his voice. I can't wait that long. There are important matters in progress. Your father's life is the priority right now, the doctor said sternly. At those words, Alex was taken aback for a moment. Disappointment was clear in the doctor's eyes regarding his attitude. A nurse emerged from the treatment room to report on Michael's condition. His ECG was stabilizing, but he was still in a dangerous state. Can I visit him? Alex asked in a matter-of-fact tone. For a short time. The doctor consented, though his expression was laden with concern. Upon entering the treatment room, his usually dignified father was lying surrounded by medical equipment, appearing frail and much weaker than the fierce opponent he had been in the conference room just before. Alex. Michael looked at his son through his oxygen mask. There's something important I need to discuss, about the will. Father, not now, Alex began, but Michael cut him off weakly yet resolutely. No, you need to hear this, Michael's voice was faint but firm. It's about the Bennett farm. That land has a special meaning. At that moment, a nurse entered. I'm sorry, but your time is up. Relieved inwardly, Alex quickly stood up. I'll come back later. As he stepped out into the hallway, he immediately pulled out his smartphone. With his back to the hospital room, he began swiftly replying to work emails. Outside the window, rain began to fall. Michael sighed quietly as he watched his son's retreating figure, seemingly sensing the impending events. The next morning, a call came into the legal department at Harrison Development. Alex was in his top-floor office reviewing amendments to the development plan when his secretary knocked and entered. "Mr. Harrison, there's an urgent call from the consulting lawyer." Annoyed, Alex set down his pen. "If it's about my father, it can wait. I need to finish this amendment today." "I'm sorry, but," the secretary hesitated, "it's an urgent matter, and the consulting lawyer is waiting in the legal department." Alex glanced at the documents on his desk, preparations for an investor presentation for the Bayside Development Plan. His ambition for the project was clearly reflected in the numbers on the pages. "All right," he stood up reluctantly. "I'll spare 15 minutes. 10 minutes later, Alex entered the legal department's conference room. An elderly consulting lawyer and a notary were waiting there. A solemn-looking envelope lay on the table. "I apologize for the interruption," the consulting lawyer greeted politely, a man who had been handling the Harrison family's legal matters for over 30 years. "Yesterday, your father instructed us to disclose something to you immediately." "A will?" Alex laughed mockingly. "My father just had a temporary episode." "Such talk is?" "This is a formal legal document," the lawyer continued firmly. "Under your father's instructions, disclosure under these circumstances has been stipulated. That's why we have a notary present." The lawyer opened the envelope and took out the document. His handling of the papers carried the weight of years of service to the Harrison family. "I'll inform you of the core part of the will," he looked over his glasses at Alex. "Unless agreements are made with all landowners regarding the Bayside Area Development Plan, Alex Harrison will not inherit the company." Alex's expression froze, but he quickly smiled confidently. The large windows of the room offered a view of the development site. "That's easy. With the right amount of money, anyone." However, the lawyer continued solemnly, "No negotiations for the sale or eviction are allowed concerning Bennett Farm, which owns the largest tract in the planned development area." "What?" Alex's voice echoed in the conference room. "That's absurd. What am I supposed to do?" "Your father said, find a way to coexist with that land," the lawyer relayed. Alex's face flushed with anger. He surged from his chair and grabbed his smartphone. "I'll talk to my father directly," he raised his voice. "I won't accept such unilateral conditions. Mr. Harrison, your father needs rest now." But Alex had already stormed out of the room. His footsteps echoed his fury down the hallway. Upon arriving at the hospital, Alex, ignoring the doctor's attempts to stop him, burst into his father's room. "What's the meaning of this?" he demanded angrily. "To tie the company's management to just one farm?" On the bed, surrounded by medical equipment, Michael slowly opened his eyes. Despite his son's fury, his expression remained calm. "Understand the value of that land," Michael spoke quietly yet firmly. "Make your judgment after that. This isn't a punishment or a trial. It's for your own." His words were lost in the steady beeps of the ECG. Morning sunlight casting long shadows between father and son. Alex averted his gaze from his father and pulled out his smartphone. Displayed on the screen was an aerial photo of Bennett Farm. His eyes coldly surveyed the vast land. 2 days later, Alex was sitting in the back seat of his favorite luxury car. The tires crunched on the gravel road as the driver carefully maneuvered the steering wheel. Alex looked sullenly at the screen of his tablet, displaying detailed map data of the planned development area. The center of the map showed a vast section labeled Bennett Farm. "Should I continue straight ahead?" the driver asked. "Yes," Alex responded without taking his eyes off the tablet screen. The car continued along a well-maintained white fence. Dressed in his usual high-end suit, Alex felt uncomfortable with the pastoral landscape outside the window. According to the development plan, this entire area was supposed to be transformed into a state-of-the-art resort facility. As the car rounded a gentle curve, the full extent of the old farm came into view. Buildings that had been preserved over many generations. Yet, there was a strange dignity to their appearance. Alex involuntarily furrowed his brow. "Stop here." Getting out of the car, Alex was confronted with an unexpected scene. Dozens of young people were working in the farm's square, their expressions lively. "Where is Ms. Bennett?" Alex asked a nearby youth, his expensive leather shoes disdainfully kicking up the dust as he walked cautiously. Then, a young woman in farming clothes turned around. Underneath her straw hat was a face of fine features. In her hand, she held a garden tool covered in soil. "I am Hannah Bennett." Her voice had a strength that exceeded Alex's expectations. "I'm Alex Harrison from Harrison Development," he said, not bothering to hide his disdain as he extended his hand. "I have something to discuss regarding this land." Hannah removed her gloves and shook Alex's hand. Her grip had a strength not often found in the refined women of the city. "Your father and I had many conversations." Hannah's words caught Alex off guard. "My father?" "Yes." Michael understood the significance of this land very well. At that moment, an elderly woman emerged from the farm's old buildings. Her demeanor was graceful yet her will resolute. "I am in Bennett," the elderly woman said with a gentle smile. "I am aware of your father. Please, come inside." Alex was led to a sitting room where a single photo on the wall captured his attention. It was of his father from about 20 years ago. Michael was smiling broadly, his arms around a group of young people, with the farm buildings that still stood in the background visible. "This is," Alex's voice trembled slightly. "Since then, Michael has cherished this place," and began quietly. "He always said there is something about this land that can't be measured by its mere real estate value." Confusion deepened within Alex. His father's will, this farm, and the people living here were slowly dismantling the simple blueprint he had envisioned. Outside, the young people continued their work joyfully. Their voices, along with the sunlight streaming through the open windows, filled the room. "Please, have a seat," Hannah brought over some warm tea. "You probably haven't heard about this place from your father." Alex was at a loss for words. Indeed, he had no recollection of his father mentioning the farm. In fact, he hadn't even tried to listen. "Actually, this farm supports young people facing various challenges," Hannah explained, looking out the window. "Victims of domestic violence, those recovering from drug addiction, young people with deep traumas or social anxieties, they all take their first steps towards a new life here." "So, it's a rehab facility," Alex said coolly. "No," Hannah's voice was calm but forceful. "This is a place where people reclaim their self-worth. They till the soil, grow crops, and work together. In the process, they cultivate their own lives as well." And brought over an old album. It contained numerous photos of young people. A photo of a young man, who had struggled with severe social anxiety, proudly holding up his first harvest. A young person who had suffered from PTSD, working with others to repair a barn. Their eyes were filled with confidence, having overcome their fears and uncertainties. This was taken 2 years ago, and pointed to a photo. "He is now a chef at a town restaurant." He comes here as a buyer of the vegetables he once helped grow. Alex continued to look at the album silently. Each photo documented real change and growth. And in many of these photos was his father, Michael. Your father visited us almost every month, Hannah continued. He listened to the young people, sometimes sternly, sometimes kindly. Why didn't he tell me? Alex's voice was small, unintentionally revealing his true feelings. He wasn't trying not to tell you, and said quietly. He was waiting for you to be ready to listen. At that moment, cheers came from outside. A new young person had arrived at the farm. The newcomers were being warmly welcomed by those who were already there. Alex stood up. Today's visit had turned out to be nothing like he had expected. His certainty about the development plans was gradually wavering. A few days later, on the way from the downtown skyscrapers to the suburbs, Alex replayed today's scenario in his mind over and over. The compromise necessary to take over his father's company. His business acumen, honed in dealings with Wall Street investors, was supposed to come to fruition today. However, as he turned a familiar curve without a sign, seeing the familiar white fence made him involuntarily straighten his back. It was his first visit to Bennett Farm in several days. Today, Alex wore a different expression than usual. Since his last visit, he had thought repeatedly about this land. The development plans, his father's will, and the people living here. Amidst these conflicting thoughts, he had come to his own solution. I'll be back in about an hour, Alex told the driver. His voice lacked its usual authoritative tone. Walking through the dewy grass, he didn't mind his expensive leather shoes getting dirty. It might have been evidence that something within him was beginning to change. Or perhaps, he was just that committed to his proposal today. In the distance, young people were preparing to start their work. Among them should be the recovering drug addicts he had seen before. Alex involuntarily stopped to watch them. People he would normally not even glance at were truly changing on this land. He still felt puzzled by this mysterious power. Hannah was working in the greenhouse, teaching the young people how to grow vegetables. The scene, bathed in the morning sun, was as harmonious as a painting. The greenhouse glass glowed softly around her. When Alex appeared, Hannah gave some quick instructions to the young people and came out of the greenhouse. Even in her dirt-stained work clothes, her demeanor retained an air of elegance. So early in the morning, Hannah said as she removed her soil-laden gloves. Is there something urgent you need? Alex took a deep breath. He had spoken in front of audiences many times during presentations on the development plan, but he felt more nervous now. The chirping of birds could be heard in the distance. Inside the greenhouse, the young people looked on with curious eyes. I have a proposal for you. Thin clouds drifted across the sky, occasionally letting the morning sun shine through. The temperature was gradually rising. A breeze passed between them. I've thought of a way to allow our development plans and this farm to coexist. Alex chose his words carefully. How about we resolve this through marriage? Hannah's expression froze. The morning quiet hung heavily between them. Voices from the greenhouse could still be heard, their everyday sounds making this moment feel all the more surreal. What exactly do you mean? Hannah's voice had lost its usual warmth. The farm will continue as it is. You can continue your activities, Alex explained in a businesslike tone. In return, I propose a marriage in name only to get development approval. We can negotiate the terms and everything will be put in writing through lawyers. It should be beneficial for you as well. Hannah's eyes briefly glanced towards the greenhouse, where the young people she had helped were visible. Alex could not understand the meaning behind her gaze. That won't be necessary. Hannah's words were quiet but icy cold. She looked around at the surrounding land. Beyond the scenery, generations of people's lives were layered. I do not intend to use this land as a bargaining chip, she continued resolutely. This place is not something whose value can be measured with money or contracts. Please take some time to think about it, Alex suggested, as if offering a concession. With this proposal, no one gets hurt. It can be a win-win situation. Please go back, Hannah interrupted him, and reconsider what true value is. At that moment, laughter from the young people in the greenhouse cut through the tense air. Alex was at a loss for words. He had not anticipated such a firm rejection. He had thought this was the best compromise. The negotiating skills honed on Wall Street had no effect here. I will give you some time to think, he said as he left. Although he maintained a calm facade, he could not hide his inner turmoil. Back in the greenhouse, and watched Hannah with concern. The grandmother sensed that something significant had occurred. They went into an old barn, a place where generations of farming tools and memories were carefully preserved. On a beam, a note left by Hannah's mother still hung. At dusk, a postman delivered a letter. The envelope, postmarked from a hospital, bore the elegant handwriting of Michael Harrison addressed to Ms. N. Bennett, and sighed deeply as she took it. She decided to read the letter with Hannah that night, quietly gazing at the sunset-drenched farm. That night in the old kitchen of Bennett Farm, and Hannah were present. A letter from Michael Harrison lay on the table. The fire in the fireplace cast their shadows on the wall. "Let's read it together," Anne said quietly, her voice carrying a hint of foreboding. The envelope was carefully opened, and a piece of stationery was taken out. Michael's neat handwriting was penned with an old fountain pen. "Dear Anne, I have long understood and respected the important role this farm has played. How many souls have been saved here? Currently, my son Alex can only see the value of land in terms of numbers. However, I am sure that one day he will understand that there is a value to this farm that cannot be bought with money. Please protect the future of this land and the young people who are saved here. And if possible, open my son's eyes as well. I still can't forget that winter day," and began quietly, gazing into the fire. "Until that day, I didn't know how much suffering my daughter, your mother, had endured." Hannah listened silently, having only heard fragments of her mother's story until now. "Your mother worked as a housemaid in a wealthy family. She fell in love with the only son of that household, and when she told him she was pregnant. But his parents called it a shameful mismatch," Anne's voice trembled. "And then she was given a severance payment and kicked out." The fire in the fireplace burned brighter. "She must have struggled a lot. She was a proud woman and didn't tell me about her hardships. I only realized when." And sighed deeply. The severance money had run out, and she was about to be kicked out of her apartment. That's when she finally came to seek help here. By then, she was about to give birth. "Your mother died soon after giving birth to you," Anne's voice broke off. "She never revealed the father's name to the end. But your determined eyes are exactly like your mother's." Hannah stood up, a resolve solidifying within her. "I'll be going," she smiled gently at her grandmother. "To Alex?" "Yes." To convey the conditions, Hannah's voice was calm but firm. Full continuation of the farm, continuation of support for the young people, and ensuring grandmother's well-being. Are you sure? This land was Mother's last hope. Hannah looked out the window. And now, it's a refuge for those seeking new hope. I'll just do what I can to protect it. And watched her granddaughter's back, feeling as if she saw the echo of her daughter in that strength. The next morning, at the high-rise building of Harrison Development, Hannah stated her name at the reception. Instead of her work clothes, she wore the only dress her mother had left behind. It was simple, yet it exuded a strange dignity. "We've been expecting you." The secretary appeared and guided her to the executive office on the top floor. Inside the high-speed elevator, Hannah reaffirmed her resolve. Alex's office had a panoramic view of the cityscape. Through the large windows, the direction of the planned development site was also visible. When he noticed Hannah, his expression softened slightly. "Have you changed your mind?" There was a hint of triumph in Alex's voice. "There are conditions," Hannah stated firmly, looking straight into Alex's eyes. "There are 3 promises I need you to keep." "What kind of conditions?" Alex responded lightly, his gaze as if already on the blueprint of the development after completion. "First, the farm must continue to exist in its complete form. No part of the land may be segregated for development." Alex nodded. It seemed like a condition he had anticipated. "Second, the youth support programs must be able to continue, including their funding." "Of course," Alex replied nonchalantly. To him, it was a negligible amount compared to the development budget. "And third," Hannah paused for a moment. "A permanent guarantee for the livelihood of my grandmother and all those who work on the farm." "Agreed." Alex picked up a pen and began taking notes as if finalizing a mere transaction. "This isn't just a transaction." Hannah's words made Alex's pen pause momentarily. "There's a value to that land that money can't measure. But until you can see it, I will protect it." Alex was at a loss for words. In the face of Hannah's determined gaze, unlike the calculative businessman he was used to dealing with, his usual tactics felt inadequate. "I'll have the lawyers prepare the formal documents," he said matter-of-factly. Yet, his voice carried a slight tremor. Hannah nodded silently and stood up. Just before leaving the office, she turned back. "Could you tell your father about this promise?" At her words, Alex's expression momentarily darkened. However, he quickly resumed his usual haughty demeanor. "Of course." As she left, Hannah stood amidst the hustle of the city. From between the high-rise buildings, she searched in the direction of the farm. The place where her mother had placed her last hopes. And now, a land where new life was sprouting. She believed that her decision to protect it was the right one. That afternoon in the boardroom of Harrison Development, Alex stood up and turned on the projector. The revised development plan appeared on the screen. "I will explain the new development plan, excluding Bennett Farm." Alex's voice retained its usual arrogance, but lacked some of its composure. "Exclude the farm?" An older executive frowned. "That undermines the core of the plan." "No," Alex pointed hastily at the blueprint. "If we develop around the farm." "Alex." The vice president interrupted him sharply. "That land is central to the plan." "Why this sudden change?" Alex hesitated for a moment, then straightened up. "I will resolve this issue by marrying the daughter of the Bennett family." The room fell silent. "Mary?" Murmurs arose among the executives. "The girl from that farm?" "Yes." with her agreement to the development? This is a real estate company, not a matchmaking agency. The vice president's voice was cold. And we cannot approve a half-baked plan. But this will meet the conditions of my father's will. Do you really qualify to inherit this company? The oldest executive stood up. His experienced eyes sparkled sharply. Alex felt parched. The air in the boardroom was heavy and suffocating. I request a review of the development plan, the vice president said calmly. Submit a new plan including the whole development, including the farm, within a week. But, Alex, you are still too young, the oldest executive advised. Don't jeopardize the future of the company by being swayed by emotions. From the large windows of the boardroom, the development site was visible. At its heart, Bennett Farm stood quietly. I will consider it, Alex answered tersely. However, his voice had lost its usual confident tone. Leaving the boardroom and heading to his office, he pulled out the draft of the contract he had discussed with Hannah that morning from his desk drawer. The continuation of the farm, the youth support, and ensuring Anne's livelihood. Just hours ago, he thought this would solve everything. What should I do? His words echoed emptily in the spacious office. As he went to get coffee, he passed by the boardroom. The lights were still on. The door was slightly open, and voices could be heard from inside. Even if Michael wakes up, it will be too late. We should proceed with the full development. That young man is in over his head. Alex stopped in his tracks. With just a few words, he had fully understood their intentions. A type of fear he had never experienced before was spreading in his chest. Was he going to lose everything, his father's legacy, his promise to Hannah, and his own position? Back in his office, Alex let out a deep sigh. The blueprints for the development plan were still spread out on his desk. Outside the window, he could see the city as the sun began to set. At that moment, his smartphone rang. It was the hospital. It's urgent. Your father's blood pressure has suddenly. Alex's hand trembled. His father's condition, the executive's actions, the promise to Hannah, it all converged, tightening around his heart. His eyes landed on a photo on his desk. It was taken at the company's 50th anniversary party. His father was smiling broadly, his hand on young Alex's shoulder. In the background was the development site, still undeveloped land at that time, and in the middle stood Bennett Farm. Father. Alex picked up the photo. He felt as if he had discovered something in his father's smile that he had never noticed before. It was pride. Not just pride in profit or growth, but pride as a testament to sincerely engaging with the lives of the people connected to this land. The smartphone rang again. This time, it was the vice president. As he stared at the call, something began to change within Alex. What was most important right now? The answer was surprisingly clear. He stood up and grabbed his coat. His secretary came in with some documents, but Alex did not stop. There's preparation for an important meeting. Cancel everything for today. Alex's voice was free of hesitation for the first time in a long while. I'm going to see my father. As he stepped into the elevator, a new message arrived on his smartphone, a formal request from the board to reconsider the development plan. Instead of opening it, Alex dialed the hospital's number. His father's condition, the promise to Hannah, and the actions of the executives, they were all supposed to be pressing him, yet strangely, his heart felt calm. It was as if something he had lost sight of for a long time was gradually becoming visible again. Days later, Alex and Hannah's engagement proceeded like a mere formality. In the boardroom of Harrison Development, they signed the contract. The executives nodded in satisfaction, barely glancing at Hannah, who faced the situation with detachment. "Let's have a celebration tonight," Alex announced a reservation at a high-end restaurant. "The most prestigious in the city?" At the farm, Hannah quietly interjected. "I'll prepare a simple dinner." Alex was momentarily at a loss for words. The eyes of the executives turned to them. "Understood." He agreed reluctantly. That evening, Alex's luxury car arrived at the farm. Under the dimming sky, a large wooden table had been set up in front of the barn. The young people were bringing out homemade dishes. "This is..." Alex looked around, puzzled. His brand suit felt out of place. The table was laden with dishes made from vegetables harvested on the farm. The bread was baked that morning. There was no wine, but homemade apple cider was served instead. "Everyone," Hannah addressed the young people. "Today is a special day. Will you join us for a meal?" One by one, the young people took their seats. Alex sat with his back straight, clearly uncomfortable. "I really appreciate what you've done, Hannah." Suddenly, a young man sitting next to Alex began to speak. He was thin, with faint scars on his arms. "2 years ago, I was..." He hesitated a little. "I was addicted to drugs. Even my family had given up on me. But coming here, touching the soil, growing crops. For the first time, I felt like I could do something." Alex silently watched the young man. "When I ruined everything on my first harvest," the young man laughed sheepishly. "Hannah just said, it'll go better next time." She didn't blame me, nor did she pity me. Across the table, Hannah was quietly smiling. "Now, I supply vegetables to a restaurant in town," the young man said proudly. "Next month, I'll even start my own small farm." Other young people began to share their stories one after another. A girl who had escaped domestic violence, a young man who had struggled with severe social anxiety, a boy who had been in and out of juvenile detention. Each spoke of how they had slowly changed on this land. Although Alex appeared indifferent on the surface, each story quietly resonated with him. "I didn't know about any of this." After dinner, Alex walked along a farm path with Hannah. The evening sky was tinged with orange. "Didn't your father tell you?" Hannah asked. "With my father, we only talked about business." Alex looked down slightly. "Since my mother died, we stopped having real conversations." Hannah stopped walking. "Do you remember your mother?" "Not much." Alex searched for the words. "Mother, born into a wealthy family, wasn't very domestic. I remember her telling my father, who loved gardening, what a waste of time." For the first time, Hannah saw a candid expression on his face. "Actually, my mother..." Hannah began. "My mother worked as a maid in a large estate. My father was the son of that house. They fell in love despite the difference in their social standings." Alex turned around in surprise, his usual haughty demeanor replaced by genuine interest. "But I'm glad I was raised on this farm," Hannah said, looking at the sunset. "This land taught me what true value is." In the distance, the young people were starting to clean up the barn. Watching them, Alex felt something slowly changing within him, as if something long frozen was beginning to thaw. On a rainy Saturday afternoon, Alex was alone in the old barn on the farm. He had a meeting scheduled with Hannah, but she was running late due to errands in town. "Wait for me in the barn," she had told him. He felt somewhat uneasy being alone in this aged space. The sound of rain drummed on the wooden roof. The air was dusty, filled with farm tools and old furniture. What he thought was just a storage space, upon closer inspection, showed that each tool was carefully maintained and orderly arranged. His eyes caught an old album on a shelf, labeled Bennett Family in handwritten script. Casually picking it up, Alex opened to the first page and caught his breath. A photo of a young woman. Dressed in an elegant maid's uniform, she smiled modestly. Her profile was unmistakably similar to Hannah's. "That's my mother." Turning around, Hannah stood there. She was taking off her rain-soaked coat as she approached quietly. "You're back quite early," Alex said, slightly flustered. "The rain seemed to be getting stronger," Hannah replied naturally as she looked over the album. "This is a photo from when my mother worked as a maid in a wealthy household." As they flipped through the pages, a photo of a young man appeared next to her. Dressed in an expensive suit, he was clearly from a different class. However, the expressions they shared were purely happy. "Is this your father?" "Yes." "But this is the only photo of him," Hannah's voice lowered slightly. A love between a wealthy heir and a maid was never meant to be. "After a small severance pay, my mother was driven out of the house." The sound of rain intensified as if to underscore the story that was unfolding. "After that, my mother started living alone in a small apartment." Hannah turned the page, which was devoid of photos. "The severance money quickly ran out, and no one would employ a pregnant woman." Alex listened silently. Oddly, he was not bothered by his high-end suit sleeves touching the dusty shelves of the barn. "Even my grandmother didn't know about my mother's hardships at that time. She was too proud to contact her own family." Hannah's fingers gently traced the blank page. "But to protect her unborn child, to protect me, she finally sought help from her family." A new photo appeared. Her mother stood in front of the old farm gate, emaciated yet cradling a large belly, her eyes still possessing a strong glimmer. "The day after this photo was taken, I was born. And then my mother." Hannah paused. The rain was now pounding on the barn roof, enveloping their silence. "But I was happy," Hannah continued. "Raised here by my grandparents. My grandfather passed away 10 years ago. Surrounded by truly important things, none of which had to do with money or status." Alex unconsciously loosened his tie. His luxury watch shone absurdly in the dim barn. "It's ironic," Hannah said quietly. "You have everything, yet you feel something is missing. My mother lost everything but found true richness on this farm. Something that money can't buy." Alex murmured reflexively. "Yes. There are indeed things that money can't buy." A ray of light pierced through the barn's small window as the rain began to ease. Inside Alex, the values he had long held were starting to waver. "Hannah," he called her name with respect for the first time. "I've told you about my mother before, haven't I?" Hannah nodded quietly. "Actually." Alex paused, searching for the words. "After my mother died, my father turned the entire garden into a parking lot. He said, 'It's the end of wasting land.'" The memory overlaid his current self. His father, who could only see the value of land in numbers, and himself, walking the same path. As the light from the window grew stronger, illuminating the pages of the album, Hannah's mother's final photo shone back at him. "This album." His voice was hushed. "After the photos, there are many blank pages left." "Yes. Maybe it's a message from my mother to us, Hannah smiled gently. There are still many stories to be woven. Outside, the rain had fully stopped, and the scent of the earth drifted into the barn. For the first time, Alex sensed something valuable in that smell. The world of development plans, profit, and numbers began to look different to him. It was as if he was finally realizing that he had been viewing the world through tinted glasses for too long. It was 2 a.m. Alex was in his office, facing the revised development plans. The story he had heard from Hannah in the barn was still lingering in his mind. The desk was cluttered with business plans brought from his father's hospital room. Among them were several notes written by his father about Bennett Farm, notes Alex had never paid much attention to before, but now they appeared different to him. His smartphone rang. "Mr. Harrison," the nurse's voice trembled, "your father's condition has suddenly changed." Alex didn't wait to hear the rest. He dashed out. Arriving at the hospital, the head doctor was waiting for him outside the ICU. His blood pressure has dropped sharply, and his consciousness is unstable. The smell of disinfectant permeated the hallway. The sound of an IV drip punctuated the silence. Alex entered the hospital room. "The land sustains life," Michael was murmuring deliriously. "It saves people." Alex took his father's hand. Normally strong, it now felt frail. "The land has the soul," Michael continued. "It's not about the numbers, it's about what's valuable." Tears welled up in Alex's eyes. Until now, he had never attempted to truly understand these words. Perhaps he had even refused to understand. "I'm starting to understand what my father meant," Alex murmured, holding his father's hand. There was a noise from the hallway, and as Alex turned around, Hannah stood there. In her white nurse's uniform, she exuded a calm presence. "Hannah. I was worried," she said quietly. "I volunteered to be the dedicated night nurse for this room as a trainee." In the hospital room, where only the sound of the heart monitor echoed, Hannah skillfully wiped the sweat from Michael's forehead. Her actions carried a strange tenderness. "Protect the land, heal people's hearts," Michael's voice leaked out again. Hannah paused her work and placed her hand on Michael's forehead, her gesture as natural as if she were caring for her own father. "The land has taught me the true value," Michael continued. Alex felt each of his father's words etching deeply into his heart. He had reviewed the documents for the development plan many times, yet he had never looked at the sentiments his father hid between the lines. "Both of you." Suddenly, Michael's voice grew a bit stronger. He opened his eyes and looked at Alex and Hannah. A faint light was in his eyes. Then, a serene smile appeared, as if he had come to some reassurance. "Father." However, Michael closed his eyes again and fell into a deep sleep. But his expression was not one of pain, rather, it was peaceful. Dawn was approaching outside the window. The regular beeping of the monitor continued. "Alex," Hannah spoke softly. "Why don't you rest a little?" He shook his head. "I'll stay right here." Holding his father's hand, Alex sank deeply into his chair. Hannah silently nodded and quietly left the room. When she returned, she gently placed a blanket over Alex's shoulders. As the night turned to morning, his father's words began to take on new meaning in Alex's heart. After spending the night in the hospital, Alex planned to head to the office once he confirmed his father's condition had temporarily stabilized. As he closed his eyes, his father's delirious words from the night resurfaced: "The land sustains life, saves people." His smartphone rang. It was Hannah. Alex. There was urgency in her voice. Get to the company right now. An emergency board meeting is being held. What? Alex straightened up. Without informing me? I overheard it from the cleaning staff. Everyone's gathering in the boardroom with documents. He rushed into a taxi to get to the office, but morning traffic delayed him. When he finally arrived, it was already too late. In the boardroom on the top floor, the executives were just packing up their documents. What's going on? The vice president looked at Alex coldly. An emergency resolution was passed. Your approval wasn't necessary. The board has already made a decision. A document was placed in front of Alex. Temporarily suspend Alex Harrison's authority and initiate full development, including Bennett Farm. The words danced before Alex's eyes. This is. Alex's voice trembled. The path chosen by my father, his will. No need for sentimental talk, the vice president snapped. Michael is bedridden. We have a responsibility to protect the company. Protect the company? Alex scoffed. By trampling over people's lives for profit. Is that how we protect this company? As he spoke, he became aware of his own irony. Just weeks ago, he too had thought the same, viewing the land's value only in terms of numbers. That's what management is about, Alex muttered to himself, but the words rang hollow. In his mind, his father's voice echoed, the land sustains life. In front of him, he could see Hannah's desperate expression from the previous night, and the hopeful eyes of the youth she spoke of. Wait, Alex said with determination. There are legal issues with this decision. Everything will proceed legally. One of the executives picked up a document. The farm's land will be dealt with through proper procedures. Just then, his smartphone rang. It was Hannah. Alex reached for the phone and hesitated. Until now, he had never thought to consult anyone else. He had believed that he could decide everything on his own. But now, for the first time, he was considering someone else's perspective. His father's wishes, Hannah's resolve, the future of the youths. These were vividly clear in his mind. I have something I must protect, Alex said with a certainty he had never felt before. The executives' faces briefly showed surprise. Outside the window, the morning sun reflected off the high-rises, making it seem as if the ground itself was emitting light. I won't allow it, Alex's voice echoed in the boardroom. You're being emotional, the vice president said coldly. You're still too inexperienced as a manager. No, Alex chose his words slowly. I'm finally seeing what's truly important as a manager. The smartphone rang again. This time it was the hospital. However, Alex did not move from his spot. Instinctively, he understood that he had to resolve this situation now. My father taught me, he continued. The land is not just real estate. It is filled with people's lives, hopes, and futures. Pretty words. They are not just pretty words, Alex looked each executive in the eye one by one. That farm has changed so many people's lives. I am a witness to that. A heavy silence fell in the boardroom. This is your last warning, the vice president stood up. If you don't accept this decision. At that moment, Alex's smartphone rang again. It was a message from Hannah. Your father has woken up. A warm feeling spread through Alex's chest. His father's words, Hannah's feelings, and the new conviction that had sprouted within him were filling his heart with a strange strength. The board's decision cannot be effective without my consent, he stated calmly yet firmly. And I will protect the farm. I believe that is how we protect the true value of this company. Outside the window, a bird took flight. Its wings shone in the morning sun, appearing like a symbol of hope. I must go. Alex turned his back. My father is waiting for me. The voices of the executives and the piles of documents no longer captured his heart. Now, he could see something far more important right before him. Days later, in the lobby of the Grand Hotel, Alex was meeting with a wedding planner. On the top floor of the luxury hotel, a main hall that could accommodate 300 guests, gourmet cuisine by top chefs, and floral arrangements by a world-famous designer. The blueprint for a perfect wedding was being laid out on the table one after another. We have prepared the finest of everything, the planner explained proudly. It will be a wedding worthy of a magazine cover. Alex nodded in satisfaction. The confrontation with the board had changed many things inside him. However, his position in social circles and the corporate image were still deeply ingrained. Have you already spoken to Hannah? After the meeting, as he got into his car, his secretary asked. I am heading to the farm now. When Alex parked in front of the barn, he witnessed an unexpected scene. A dozen young people were refurbishing the old building. The walls had been freshly painted, and a handmade chandelier was about to be hung from the ceiling. We thought it would be wonderful to have the wedding here, one of the youths explained proudly. We all thought of it together. But I have already reserved the hotel. Hannah is our pride. Another youth stopped his work to speak. Without her, we wouldn't be here today. So we wanted to do what we could. At that moment, cheers erupted from the back of the barn. It's done. Looking up, an old beam shone brightly with a handmade chandelier hanging from it. The frame, woven from wire, held carefully polished glass jars, creating a subtle rainbow on the floor as it caught the sunlight. We collected these one by one, a youth who had recovered from drug addiction explained. From the city's recycling center. Hannah taught us that even broken things can become beautiful if you care for them. Alex was at a loss for words. The recycled glass lamps seemed to emit a warmer light than the crystal chandeliers he had just seen in the luxury hotel. Hannah stood there in her work clothes, still exuding an unchanged dignity. I'm sorry. I've already booked the hotel, he said. The company executives, clients. I have to invite a lot of people. I understand, Hannah smiled quietly. As you wish. Really? But her eyes shone with a strong light. Let me decide on my own dress. The sound of the youths working flowed between them. The old barn was surely gaining a new shine. This barn, Hannah continued, will surely become a precious place for someone even after the wedding. So, everyone's efforts won't be wasted. Alex nodded with a complex expression. The perfect wedding at the Grand Hotel. A small doubt began to sprout in his heart about whether it was truly necessary. As evening approached and the youths finished their work, a young girl holding a small broom stood in the barn. Once a victim of domestic violence, her expression now held a calm pride. This barn, the girl suddenly spoke to Alex, is the first place where I felt safe enough to sleep. Hannah brought me a blanket and stayed by my side all night. Alex listened in silence. So, the girl said shyly, I climbed to the top to hang this chandelier. It was scary, but, because Hannah taught me, I realized that I could face things I thought I couldn't. The envelope containing the Grand Hotel's wedding plan felt strangely heavy in Alex's pocket. We, the girl continued while finishing her cleaning. Hope this barn becomes a place for new beginnings for someone else. Because it's where we all started our new lives. As the sun began to set, the handmade chandelier caught the evening light. The irregular pattern of light spread across the barn floor. It will be a beautiful ceremony. Hannah stood beside Alex. If we do it here, this barn will be a place where you can proudly welcome your important people. This barn will surely become just that. Alex couldn't respond yet. However, something was definitely shaking within him. Maybe the luxurious decorations of the hotel, the cuisine of a top chef, and the flowers of a world-famous designer couldn't compare to the warm light filling this barn. Still, he ultimately chose to have the wedding at the hotel as planned. Hannah didn't say anything, she just quietly nodded. However, as they left the barn, Alex couldn't help but look back repeatedly. In the twilight, the handmade chandelier flickered faintly, like a beacon of hope for the future. On the day of the wedding, at the top floor of the Grand Hotel, a chandelier made of 1,000 crystals adorned the ceiling, and the vast cityscape unfolded from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Alex slid into his custom-tailored tuxedo and checked his reflection in the mirror. From the fabric to the tailoring, everything was of the highest quality. When he had reported to his father in the hospital room, Michael hadn't said anything, but something suggestive flickered in his eyes. "It's almost time," the wedding planner announced. Socialites, business magnates, and board members were steadily taking their seats. Alex made a final check of the venue's preparations. Roses selected stem by stem for the floral decorations, a wedding cake specially made by the chef, and then, "The bride has arrived." The room fell silent. Alex straightened his back, his usual haughty expression in place. But then the moment arrived. The doors opened, and Hannah appeared. Alex's face froze. Hannah was wearing a 50-year-old handmade wedding dress. The lace trim had yellowed slightly with time, and delicate mending was visible at the hem. Yet, the dress shone as if it were woven with stories. Every stitch of the fine lace was filled with sure intent. The mending at the hem was like a testament to the days that had passed. The dress had been sewn by Anne's mother for her own wedding and had been passed down to Anne, and then to Hannah's mother. The room buzzed loudly. Oh, such an old dress. For such a grand occasion. At least she could have worn something new. The whispers of the high society ladies flowed around the room. The executives looked at Hannah with mocking eyes. Among the guests clad in the latest designer dresses, Hannah's certainly seemed out of place. Amidst this atmosphere, Hannah walked forward with dignity. Her presence seemed to dim even the luxurious decorations of the venue. Each step was supported by a firm will. Alex was breathless. This dress was not just an outfit. It carried the lives of 3 generations of women. Modesty, yet an unshakable strength. It offered a genuine sparkle that was different from the artificial brightness of the venue. A board member made a disdainful cough. But to Alex, such reactions no longer mattered. He watched Hannah approach. Behind the old lace, he saw her encouraging the youths at the farm. Her eyes, earnestly speaking in the barn, and an invisible, precious legacy passed down through generations. Deep emotion spread through Alex. When Hannah reached the altar, everything seemed clear to Alex. The handmade lace at the hem of the dress. It wasn't there to hide poverty, but rather it was infused with rich love. The slight repair at one shoulder, surely her mother had made it, imagining her daughter's bright future. The delicate embroidery at the waist, Anne's young fingertips must have stitched it, wishing for her daughter's happiness. "What a beautiful dress!" an elderly woman in the front row murmured. Her voice began to change the chilly air around her. The light from the crystal chandeliers reflected off the old lace, casting an unexpected glow. It was a soft, warm light, unlike the artificial brightness created by the venue. Alex looked into Hannah's eyes. They held a quiet strength and a firm pride, the kind that only someone who knows the true value of things can possess. The mocking looks of the executives, the whispers of high society, no longer mattered. Now, what was happening in front of him wasn't just a wedding. It was a moment where something precious, passed down through generations, was palpably alive. After the toast, it was time for speeches. Alex slowly stood up, holding the printed speech that had been perfected with the wedding planner. It was flawless, prepared for everyone, company executives, business partners, the elite of society. But Hannah's dress caught his eye. Bathed in the morning light, the 50-year-old lace shimmered mysteriously. Alex lifted his gaze from the script and took a deep breath. "This dress has a history of 50 years, he began unexpectedly, causing the hall to fall silent. The executives wore confused expressions, but Alex continued. "I have always pursued what is new. I destroyed the old to replace it with the new, believing that was progress." He quietly placed the speech on the table. "I thought money could buy everything, land, buildings, even people's hearts," Alex's voice filled the room. "But now I finally understand that the truly important things only increase in value over time." He looked at Hannah. The old dress stood out in the luxurious setting, appearing all the more dignified. "The dress cannot be bought with money, because it has the sentiments of 3 generations of women sewn into every stitch. The land is the same. It holds values that numbers cannot measure, lives, hopes." The words faltered slightly. The venue was eerily silent. "Hannah," Alex looked directly at her. "You have taught me what true richness is. What matters most. And what love is." A slight moisture appeared in Hannah's eyes. "Initially, I proposed a marriage of convenience, a business transaction." Alex's voice carried a hint of regret. "But now it's different. Right now, the person in front of me has changed my life." Tears quietly glimmered in Anne's eyes as she sat in the front row. "The young people I met at the farm," Alex continued. "They taught me that people can change. I saw real strength in them, even though they had no money, status, or honors. And..." He paused for a deep breath. "And my father was always trying to tell me this. The land is not just real estate. It has a soul, it heals people, it nurtures, it saves." The expressions of the executives gradually began to shift. "Hannah," Alex's voice softened. "Like your dress, truly valuable things deepen over time. I want to nurture such values with you." The light streaming through the window captured a tear trickling down Hannah's cheek. It was a tear of joy, a tear that acknowledged the sincerity of Alex's words. And clasped her hands in front of her chest and nodded quietly. Her face expressed relief, feeling that the sentiments of her daughter and granddaughter had indeed reached their destination. The atmosphere in the venue had completely changed. The heavy formalities of the wedding were gone, replaced by an air filled with genuine love and hope. The chandelier's light bathed the 50-year-old wedding dress. Now, it quietly, yet assuredly, shone as a witness to this new vow. A week after the wedding, a board meeting of Harrison Development was held. Soft spring sunlight filtered through the windows of the conference room. We have decided to completely withdraw the development plan," Alex declared, his voice filled with unprecedented conviction. "And I have a new proposal." Displayed on the screen was a photo of Bennett Farm. The old barn was already undergoing renovation. "I want to officially designate this farm as our company's personnel development center. We will make it a major part of our corporate social contribution activities, focusing on supporting young people's independence." "But the profits?" a board member began to interject. "There will be profits," Alex smiled calmly. "But not just in numbers. We are investing in the most important asset, the human heart." A fresh air seemed to breeze through the conference room. That afternoon, Alex headed to the hospital. It was Michael's day of discharge. "Father," Alex greeted as he opened the door to the hospital room. Michael was gazing out the window, his face no longer showing the fatigue of before. "I heard about the development plan." Michael turned around. His eyes brimmed with pride. "You found the real value, haven't you?" "Yes. Someone taught me," Alex replied as he pushed his father's wheelchair. "Actually, from today, I'd like us to recuperate at the farm." "At the farm?" "Yes. The young people are waiting for you." As they passed through the gates of the farm, the youth lined up to greet them. The barn had been transformed into a training center, with new windows letting in the light. However, the handmade chandelier remained in its place, gently shining, and stood at the front porch, her profile as resolute as that of her daughter in the photographs. "Welcome back," Hannah greeted them. Dressed in work clothes, her demeanor was as dignified as on her wedding day. Michael's gaze softly swept over the landscape of the farm. "I always wanted this scenery to remain unchanged." "It won't change," Hannah replied. "But new life will slowly begin to sprout here." True to her words, new activities were already taking root at the farm. Corporate training sessions were set to start on weekends, with young employees working the soil alongside the youth. Old values and new values were naturally blending together. At dusk, Alex carefully stored a box on the second floor of the barn. Inside was Hannah's wedding dress, meticulously folded. The lace whispered quietly of its 50-year history. "Something precious, isn't it?" Hannah's voice came from behind. "Yes," Alex replied as he placed the box on the shelf. "Someday, for our daughter. By then, the yellowing will probably be more pronounced," Hannah smiled. "But that's exactly where its value lies." Outside, Michael was teaching the youth how to grow vegetables, and watched contentedly from the porch. The sounds of tilling the soil, the laughter of the youth, and the evening breeze, all spoke of the genuine richness of this place. "Let's go," Hannah extended her hand. "Everyone's waiting." Together, they walked down the stairs and out into the farm bathed in the sunset. The seedlings planted by the youth stood straight, pointing to the sky, a sign that new stories were beginning to unfold on this land. And remembered the day her daughter had rushed back to this farm. Her decision then had now borne fruit. On this land passed down through generations, the hopes of a new generation were truly taking root. Under the sunset sky, the silhouette of the Harrison Development skyscraper was visible in the distance. It seemed to be gazing at the farm, looking towards a new future.